I made a video about why I think the current state of self-improvement is occasionally harmful, but mostly just an impotent waste of everyone's time. But really, pointing out bad stuff is pretty easy work, so whilst I don't want to offer myself as somebody with all the solutions, I'm going to treat this video as my self-improvement suggestion box and really just say what I think about how we could make self-improvement better. Now, we can't really judge better without defining a goal, so for now I'm just going to use a blanket term like life satisfaction. I think that covers most of it, and whilst a lot of self-improvement might focus on improving specific personal attributes, I think I'm on pretty safe ground in saying that the reason behind wanting to work on one's attributes is so that we can then use them to get what we want out of life. More sense of purpose and engagement, more achievements, better relationships, health, wealth, happiness, all that kind of stuff. All right, that's out of the way. I'm just going to throw these at you in no particular order because having thoughts is much easier than organizing thoughts. Denounce introspection. The danger of introspection is that it's easy to make the mistake of thinking you're not looking hard enough, when in actual fact, the answers you're looking for were never even there. And upon making this mistake, what do? You keep looking, obviously. You look deeper, you commit to more and more soul searching and self-reflection. What's my passion? What kind of person do I want to be? What's my idea of a good life? I think it's a dangerous myth that these things are somehow innate, almost predetermined, and we just have to winkle them out of the inner recesses of our mind. Dangerous in the sense that you'll waste your life looking for the answers instead of realizing that you get to decide these things, right? You're sat staring at a blank canvas instead of putting paint on it. The paint's life experience, it's a metaphor. Now, this isn't to say that introspection is never useful. Of course, if you want to unpack some childhood trauma, or you realize that people think you're a tit and you want to figure out what's causing you to be a tit so you can be less of one, or even just out of curiosity, by all means, reflect. But don't spend forever doing it, because if the answers are there, they'll probably appear pretty quick. You don't need a gap year to do this. You probably don't need to quit your job or do DMT or even meditate. All you need is like an early morning walk or a late night drive, small amount of time to yourself, and most crucially, the ability to think clearly. And for that, the first thing you should actually do is try to reduce your everyday stress levels, which brings me on to my next point. First, focus on the pragmatic reduction of stress. I don't believe that people need some kind of edge in order to flourish. They don't need to go to great lengths to optimize every area. They don't need to take the latest supplement that they heard mentioned in a 10-second TikTok soundbite. They just need to get rid of what's holding them back. I realize that I'm in very real danger here of coming across as an optimist, but I believe in people's ability to do cool shit and be mad creative and excel at things, but it's much harder, not impossible, but much harder to thrive if you're hampered by the mental haze that stress inflicts on you. Yeah, we can talk about there being good types of stress, but most of the everyday stress people encounter isn't the good kind, it's the bad kind. Now, you can't just say to people, be less stressed. It's not typically a choice in that sense. And of course, we're all in different situations. Life is both chaotic and unfair. Not everyone is born into the same circumstances. Tragedy and misfortune don't really care much for equality. I'm just saying, do what you can, if you can. Look at the main stresses in most people's lives. Things like health, money, relationships. There are basic things that you can do to give yourself the best chance of avoiding these stresses. Eat fruit and veg, exercise, enforce a bedtime, limit your alcohol, delete Instagram and Twitter if they give you anxiety, live below your means, get insurance in case your house burns down, create an emergency fund. You do not need a Gucci flip-flop. Be diplomatic in your relationship, or don't be in one. You don't need me to tell you all this basic stuff. The point is, this all comes before you even contemplate the phrase self-improvement. Because if you can just take care of all this practical stuff that's going to have a real world impact on your everyday life, you clear out a bit of stress and you free up some mental bandwidth, and you can do a lot with that. This is your foundation. If you're spending time and energy and, God forbid, money on crazy routines and all these theatrical, symbolic self-improvement habits before you've laid the foundation, you're really putting the cart before the horse. Focus second on skills, interests, and life experience. This is really just continuing with the theme of doing practical shit instead of all the abstract, indirect shit that a lot of self-improvement focuses on. Or maybe it's a marriage of the previous 2 points. But I could also phrase it another way. Spend less time looking in and more time looking out. You know what self-improvement used to be called? Improvement. That's not semantics. We really don't need the self part at all. Don't think about how you can be an interesting person. Think about how you can be an interested one. You'll become better by getting better at stuff. So pursue skills, hobbies, experiences, explore whatever interests you, even if there's no immediate and obvious benefit. I've spent as much time as the next person thinking about myself, right? Maybe more. And you know what I discovered? I'm not that interesting. Not compared to the world outside of me and outside of my head. I think self-improvement should be more of a byproduct than a focus. A byproduct of living with a bit of intention and an open mind. I also think most of the actual successful people who you might look up to today never went through a self-improvement phase as such. They improved themselves, but it was called growing up, living life, getting busy, applying themselves to whatever pursuit they found engaging. It happened in the background of an intentional life. If you're always focusing on and thinking about yourself, your entire stream of consciousness becomes this inner monologue where you're narrating this story in which you're the main character and this universe revolves around you, right? You spend your time daydreaming about how you might act in a certain situation or worrying about what other people think of you, right? That's a big self-improvement topic in itself. How do I stop caring what other people think of me? For the most part, you can skip the exercise in mental gymnastics because most people don't think about you. It would be more appropriate to ask, how do I stop imagining that everyone is always thinking about me? At the very least, just be conscious of how too much focus inward can spill over into your interactions with other people, right? Who do you least want to talk to at a party? It's the dude who doesn't shut up about himself. Don't just read books, read stories. The fallacy is that you can only learn from popular science books or business tycoon autobiographies or some other non-fiction self-help stuff. But aside from actual life experience, we learn most from other people. And I don't think it actually matters if those people exist in the real world or not. In fact, sometimes I think it's better if they don't, and I'll explain why. One component of what makes great fiction is great characters. Now, these characters are created, after all, by real people who do exist, but they often have traits and characteristics either to extremes or in combinations that you'd never encounter in real life. They can be exaggerated, almost caricature forms of what we encounter in the real world. And it's this exaggeration that makes them more pronounced, stark examples for us to learn from, be it through their wisdom or folly. Some of you might have an example of one such fairly popular book in mind, although some might not consider that fiction. Now, I'm not saying you should pick up a novel hoping to learn something. That's totally not the point. But I'm saying read whatever you enjoy. And if you learn anything, it's a bonus. Or if you are there just purely to learn and not for leisure, then 9 times out of 10 with these self-improvement books, just watching the YouTube summary is probably the best option. Don't wait for leisure. I'm not going to sit here and dictate your schedule for you, right? I'm sure you can make the call of when to get your work done and when to go out with your mates. But let me just remind everyone that one of the most common regrets that dying people express is that they wish they'd worked less. And most people don't have the choice. But if you do have the choice, just choose wisely, because once you're comfortable financially, once you can cover your bills for the next few months and you have a bit back for emergencies, it really is diminishing returns, right? That doesn't mean don't try and get rich. I'm not anti-success. I'm just pro think about it and decide for yourself what constitutes enough for you, because it's probably a bit too simple to just be against the grind and say things like hustle culture is bad, right? And generic shit like balance is key. Some people are bang into the hustle culture lifestyle and they actually enjoy working all the time. It almost is their leisure. And at the end of the day, you can't criticize somebody who's just doing what they want to do. But there's a difference between that and doing something as a means to an end. Because if you're working your fingers to the bone because one day you think that you're gonna get there and achieve a certain thing or a certain level of wealth, and you'll get this sense of completion or being done, and then you can relax and enjoy yourself. Well, I think a lot of people find that was a bit of a mirage. Again, I'm not saying that's always the case, but it's a distinct possibility that needs considering. And the extension of that is maybe it's worth enjoying yourself now. Probably is. All right, I could go on, but this is getting long and my camera is running out of battery. So those are some of my thoughts, but that's probably it for a while on the topic of self-improvement. I don't want to inadvertently become the anti-self-improvement guy, because the irony would just be too much to bear. I'm just a person figuring stuff out, same as everyone else, so everything you just heard is mere conjecture. I don't want to tell people how to live. I don't have a course for you to buy or an inner circle that you can join where we can all pat each other on the back. And I made this video purely for selfish purposes, just because I found it somewhat interesting, but might do some fitness stuff next. See you later.
You see me rolling, they hating. Joey Lenny is my hero.